Chapter 20. From Rabbi Adam Baal Shem to Rabbi YISRAEL Baal Shem Tov. Baruch and his new friend, Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul, took a great liking to each other, and their friendship grew closer every day. It was from Yitzchak Shaul that Baruch, for the first time, learned about Rabbi Adam Baal Shem, as well as about Rabbi YISRAEL Baal Shem Tov, who was already at this time at the head of the Hasidic movement. The history that Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul related of his father Rabbi Nissen was also the history of Chasidim to date. Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul, who followed in his father's footsteps, was himself a living example of the Hasidic way of life, and as he spoke to Baruch with all the fire and enthusiasm of his convictions, Baruch was indescribably moved and impressed. Baruch learns about the early Hasidim. Baruch had been earnestly seeking the true way of Torah and the service of God, but thus far he had met with little success, and now he suddenly realized that he was face to face with a Jewish way of life which was harmoniously complete both as regard to the study of the Torah and the service of God, learning and practice, a life where mind and heart acted in perfect agreement. So Baruch swallowed greedily every word he heard from Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul about his father's association with the first Hasidic mystics, and of the way they spread Chasidism among the masses. After Rabbi Nissen had been 6 months in the secret Hasidic group in Minsk, he became acquainted with 2 remarkable personalities of the old Hasidim. One was Rabbi Mordechai of Dubrovna, and the other was Rabbi Yitzchak of Monastirchna. Both men were famous in their respective towns, having succeeded their fathers as the spiritual leaders of their communities. Rabbi Mordechai's father was the Gaon Rabbi Chaim, and Rabbi Yitzchak's father was the Gaon Rabbi Binyamin Segal. Both became Hasidic mystics and wandered from town to town, sowing the seeds of Hasidic teachings and establishing in each place small groups of Hasidim to further teach and spread Chasidism. And it was to these 2 mystics that Rabbi Nissen attached himself, and together with them wandered from place to place. During their wanderings, they eventually reached Harki, where after much effort they managed to establish a Hasidic group. They decided that Rabbi Nissen should remain in Harki in order to strengthen the Hasidic movement there and be the leader of the newly formed Hasidic group. Rabbi Nissen married the daughter of a respected local citizen. After a year they were blessed with a son, whom they named Yitzchak Shaul. For 10 years Rabbi Nissen carried on with his Hasidic activities in Harki. He often received manuscripts detailing the further developments of Chasidism brought to him personally by special messengers. Harki became an important center of Chasidism, and the number of its adherents grew, and Hasidic influence was felt in the whole surrounding district. As we know, Rabbi Nissen earned his living by teaching, but he also found time, occasionally, to join various Hasidim in their wanderings for the purpose of spreading the teachings of the Hasidic way of life. During the course of time, the leadership of the movement was handed down from Rabbi Adam Baal Shem to Rabbi YISRAEL Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Nissen later had an opportunity of visiting the Baal Shem Tov and becoming his disciple. Thus he followed the whole development of Chasidism from the time it was first introduced by the mystic Rabbi Adam Baal Shem until the day of the already well-known Rabbi YISRAEL Baal Shem Tov at the height of his fame. When Yitzchak Shaul was a young boy, he did not know anything of Chasidism. His father evidently felt he was not ready to be taught about the secret new movement. He wanted him, first of all, to become a diligent Torah student and learn to live ethically. He therefore sent him to the yeshiva at Minsk, at the same time putting him in contact with some of his old friends there who were all secretly living the life of Chasidism. The young Yitzchak Shaul found much to interest him and admire in his association with his father's friends, but it was not until he returned home to Harki that he learned of their Hasidic affiliation. By this time, the new doctrines of Chasidism were being openly taught in Harki, and Rabbi Nissen began little by little to open his son's eyes to all that Chasidism meant and stood for. This, briefly, was the story Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul told Baruch of his father. Now it was his turn to do for his friend what his father had done for him. Baruch eagerly listened to all that Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul had to tell him about Chasidism, which was so new to him. Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul's way of living was also new to Baruch. His original approach to life and his easy and logical grasp of the essential in life. His attitude toward his fellow Jews, particularly toward ordinary folk, just called for the highest admiration in Baruch. Baruch had a good opportunity of making a comparison between Yitzchak Shaul and his two learned brothers-in-law and seeing the difference between their outlooks. He happened to be by when Rabbi Moshe Leib was telling his brother-in-law, Rabbi Yitzchak Shaul, what a surprise he had had in the Beis HaMedrash. He had been listening to two young boys studying Gemara together and was greatly impressed with their brilliance. Imagine my astonishment, said Moshe Leib, when on asking the boys who they were, they told me they were the sons of Zevulun ben Yamin, the skinner of carcasses, and of Yisrael Shmuel, the carpenter, respectively. I could not repress the thought that these boys so aptly exemplified the saying, who will bring forth clean out of unclean, which our sages tell us refers to Avram, the son of Terach. Now here we have such coarse material as Zevulun ben Yamin and Yisrael Shmuel, he continued, and yet they have such fine and clever sons. His tone was so cold and dispassionate, as if he had been speaking of something quite ordinary and did not realize the contradiction in his own words. Baruch saw his friend Yitzchak Shaul for the first time become absolutely incensed. He shook with fury as he turned upon his brother-in-law and positively shouted the words at him. How dare you indulge in such sinful talk? You are insulting truly fine people. This particular carpenter, Yisrael Shmuel, of whom you speak so slightingly, is a great scholar, I would have you know, because he does not flaunt his knowledge in the eyes of people. Very few know about it. I myself only discovered the fact by accident. I am, however, a witness to the fact that he knows the entire Seder Nezikin and Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. He knows every page and every line of Seder Nezikin by heart. Can you name me any of the brilliant young Torah scholars who know the whole Seder Nezikin by heart? And do you know that this same humble carpenter is constantly rehearsing what he has studied in the Torah while he is at his work? As for this Zevulun ben Yamin, for whom you continually show so much contempt and can find no other name other than skinner of carcasses, I would have you know that he conducts himself like a true tzaddik in his simplicity and sincerity. Yitzchak Shaul had much more to say about people like his brother-in-law, who look down upon simple and uneducated people instead of doing something to raise them to a higher educational level. He then related how it came about that he discovered what a remarkable scholar the apparently simple carpenter Yisrael Shmuel was. There was a paritz by the name of Sigismund Kivachitsky, who lived near Dober Mizl, who wanted a special kind of sleigh similar to the one that he had seen at the home of another paritz named Yosef Shvenitsky, whose estate was near Lubavitch. This particular sleigh was built in such a way that it could be used in the deepest falls of snow. Many nobles used this kind of sleigh for hunting in their forests in the wintertime. They were broader and stronger than other sleighs. So Sigismund Kichavitsky sent for the smith Eliezer Reuven and his son-in-law Yitzchak Shaul, as well as for the carpenter Yisrael Shmuel. When they arrived, he provided them with a special carriage to make the journey to the estate of the nobleman Yosef Shvenitsky, so they could examine his sleigh and make one for him exactly like it. Yisrael Shmuel set about preparing the woodwork involved, while Eliezer Reuven and his son-in-law attended to the work which called for a smith. It was a task which lasted for weeks, and the three of them were constantly together. Thus it happened that Yitzchak Shaul was struck by the fact that Yisrael Shmuel was constantly singing to himself while working, and he seemed to be singing words which had a familiar ring. Yitzchak Shaul then gave a more attentive ear to what he was hearing, and found that the carpenter was actually quoting by heart from the Gemara, page after page, without a stop. Yitzchak Shaul then knew without a doubt what a scholar was in their midst. And do you wish to imply that were he not the great scholar we have discovered him to be, he would not merit the absolute respect to which every decent person is entitled, concluded Yitzchak Shaul challengingly? Baruch's conviction grew that the Chasidism which his friend represented was in truth a novel and very fine way of serving the Creator.